I think we can actually skip the round of introductions because you just all been here already on stage. So maybe you could just start with saying one sentence, like, so what's your view on threat hunting? What's your vision of this whole topic, and which we would kind of throw into the discussion?
I think my one sentence on threat hunting is, A, that it's slightly different to what you described. And for me, it's building hypotheses and then gathering data to prove or disprove these hypotheses. Happy to go into more detail later, but that's it for now.
And now me. So I just talk about it. And for me, threat hunting is also to look for current intrusion and also to look for potential intrusion in the internal and the external perimeter. And together to have some understatement of how can I detect threats besides my security controls.
Okay, well, I had a definition in my slide deck before in my talk, and well, it's two definitions. One is finding the needle in the haystack, but actually the definition I had is that it's a process of proactively and iteratively searching through your network to detect and isolate threats which evade existing security solutions. So it's kind of both what you guys said. We need data, so it's a process. It's a manual process. You need to do it, and we need data to get all the information we need to do educated guesses. Let's call it this way.
Can I ask a question to my fellow panelists?
Sure.
So when you say the threat hunt is a process, do you think that process can turn into a detection rule or signature, for example?
Absolutely. So, well, I've also mentioned it in my talk. We are short on cybersecurity, on threat hunting skills at the moment. So we do not have enough people to do the job. But we should have, right? So, well, let's not say should have, but we need people to do the job. And what you said is to have a machine doing the job because of baselines you created up front. So yeah, it could be a way. Yeah.
And, okay, great. So I think we already have a question.
Oh, it's getting interactive.
Hello. This kind of subject, threat hunting, it's new. My question is, we have a malware analysis, we have a pen tester, and I think it's good to clarify what the difference these three topics. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm happy to start talking about it. That's also why I not fully agree with you. I think there's a need for threat hunting, but I think it's madness to try to get threat hunters into every company or create skills. It's so specialized, it doesn't scale. That's why companies like yours exist, right? Because it doesn't grow on trees. So I think there's a need for it, but there's also confusion around it, right? What's the difference between a blue teamer, a red teamer, and now a threat hunter? So pen test or red team for me is quite obvious. You attack stuff, right? You try to break it so you can build new detections, like you said. Blue team for me is analytics driven, how you described analytics driven. You sit in your SOC and you wait for alerts to come in, and then you work through these alerts in a playbook. For me, a threat hunter is separate to both, where you don't wait for alerts and you don't break things. You sit down, tabula rasa, at a whiteboard and think, okay, maybe based on external threat intel or the diamond model, for example, for threat hunting, or the threat intelligence pyramid of pain, and you think, okay, I'm Deutsche Bank, to continue your example, I might be targeted by a malware actor that uses RDP to move laterally. And then with this hypothesis, I go into my data. I might deploy new telemetry and new sensors. I might look at my existing solutions like Azure or Sentinel or whatever, and then I try to prove or disprove this. So it's a different process for me, where you don't start by detecting things, but you start clear and then go and dig deeply into that stuff.
Yeah. I think I really agree with your approach. And I think that it is a hard question, how to define the capabilities of a threat hunter. What is the skills that I need to look for in a potential threat hunter, and what should I write in the job description when I looking for a new employee? And I think that things getting brighter from day to day. As I see it, I believe that threat hunters should be aware of all the security systems and all the vulnerabilities, and he should be the one who collaborates between all the other teams of the security operation, as you mentioned, the red team, the blue team, the threat intelligence, and the forensics, in order to find what is going on. Like as a threat intelligence, will release a weekly landscape report about recent attacks for the financial sector, and he will be the one who take the findings and try to implement it in the way that he looks for these talked threats in the multiple clients that we are having. That's how I see it. I believe that it will be like very flexible during the time, because as you mentioned, there is no strict explanation of this role yet. But yeah.
Well, what I said before, that threat hunting is a process of searching, and we agreed that this is a process a machine can do for us. The threat hunter today maybe does not need to be the person to know all the security issues we have in all the operating systems, for example, we have there. But there needs to be a tool that helps you to drag it down. This is what we've done with the demos before, because with, for example, with this intelligent security graph we have there, that would be such a kind of a machine learning tool to give you the information, the necessary information you need to react on something. Mm-hmm. And so a threat hunter could also be a person in the SOC, be a person in the SOC, who is sitting there, who's knowing about the environment, but who's not the guy who has to really dig into it very, very deeply, because it's almost impossible. I mean, there are specialists for Windows servers, specialists for Linux servers, mm-hmm. network specialists, wherever. I don't think you find you might find one person, but they're really, really, really short in supply.
And those actually exactly the thoughts which were kind of going through my head. Where do you find enough threat hunters? Because it's such a really totally new set of skills required.
Absolutely.
What would you envision such a next-gen threat hunter would be? Would it be like a general, having a lot of underlings doing all the menial jobs for him, or would it be like kind of an artist, a psychic maybe, or will it be a professional, really expensive one which you would just kind of hire on a subscription basis?
To jump in there, in theory, my title is Director of Threat Hunting at my workplace, so I'm heading up 30 threat hunters, so I think a lot and hard about this. And it can be very much aided by a tool. You were asking, what does a threat hunter look like? How can you nurture them? Where do they come from? Our people in my team, which I mentor, they don't have IT backgrounds at all. They sit in front of a solution like Darktrace or Sentinel, for example, where you have the initial hypotheses, the leads, that could be anomalies. So threat hunting is about embracing uncertainty. In a blue team SOC, you hate uncertainty. You want your well-defined rules. You want as little false positives as possible. A threat hunter embraces uncertainty, where it just says an unusual amount of traffic going to Russia. It's a perfect starting point for a threat hunter to dive down and look at this stuff. But that's a different skill set. So we had loads of success using clever young people, no IT backgrounds, but they've got a PhD in astrophysics, a master's in languages, maybe a bachelor's in chemistry, so they're very good at covering data points, pivoting around data, but might not have the deep down IT security background which tells you Kerberos event 132 is Windows event login failure or something. So I think it's a different skill set there that's required.
Anyone else to add something? Or should we just go and ask the next question?
I think maybe I will add something short. I think that the real skill, or maybe character of a good threat hunter should be to be passionate about doing actions, because he can, he can be passive and wait to alert to come into the system. But threat hunter should be someone who always need to be aware and do some checks, because actually his job is to discover new things. So he can sit and drink coffee and be unemployed because, it's up to him. But we need someone who will look to fight, okay? Look for a war. So this kind of personal...
so like Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have a next question.
Yeah.
It's actually not a question, it's a comment just on the skills required for the job. And just to add to that, and you touched on this as well, there are an awful lot of highly skilled investigators studying arts. I don't think we really require technical skills in cybersecurity as much as people like to think. The tooling is always changing, the job roles are always changing. And I think you'll find in historians and archaeologists and linguists and everybody else, investigative, troubleshooting, problem solving, thesis proposing type of skills, and we aren't investing in those people enough in our industry. And that's why we have a skill shortage, because we do still retain this snobbery about technical capabilities.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. My 30 people have 50% women or 60%, I think, huge diversity. And it's this mix of skills that really leads to this uptick in clever, bright investigations. But I think that's only possible to have these smart young people if the machines do the heavy lifting. You couldn't put a junior, which is an arts degree, no offense, in front of a SIM solution to triage hundreds of logs, right? You need something that does the heavy lifting to a certain degree and allow you to do the clever analytical work on top.
Yeah, I see, I understand, I appreciate that. I think you're not wrong. However, tools can be learned more easily than people think as well. And I think that analytics and creative thinking are something that we need to sort of really appreciate more, because those those people who are the glue between everything else are what's going to get us through, I think. So.
And just one short remark from my side. So here we have a discussion between, let's just put it, representatives of very large companies with billions in revenue, probably. What about us, like Cooking a Call, which only has like 50 people altogether? Do we need to hire a threat hunter, or can we rely on someone else?
Well, you know the drum I'm banging, right? So I don't think you should need to. So that's why I'm not saying buy clever AI solutions, right? I'm saying we as an industry need to move away from we need to hire more experts, we need to train more experts, absolutely. But we also need to change the way we do security. So you don't need to hire 3 threat hunters for a 50-people company. You could either consume a managed service, right, for example, which is always good if you trust your MSSPs. It's another topic, I suppose. Or if your tools do most, like 99% of the heavy lifting for you, blocking all the stuff, then that's perfect. We're not there yet, but that's the dream, right?
I will add later. It's good.
Okay, I have a question which is touching into legal discussions and also ethical and morale of people. When you do threat hunting, one of the things you will most probably do is to access data on the internet, on the dark web or wherever, that is most likely stolen. Now, downloading data which is stolen is actually not legal in most countries. So what kind of legal considerations have you done at your companies to evaluate whether you can do this or not, or how you can do it? And also, what kind of training do you provide for your employees in ethics or morals in handling this kind of data?
Okay, so I guess it's for me. Actually, all the process that we are doing with the dark web is also outsourced using a third-party company, which provides us the tool, automation tool, that we can access an archive that was already crawled from the dark web from multiple sources, and then like we have a dark web Google kind of that we can trigger queries related to our clients' assets, so we don't need to get manually into the dark web places. And these vendors, like the third-party software of the dark web automations, are legitimate companies, and they are aligned with privacy rules and all the legal issues. And in cases that we want to access manually to the dark web itself, we have very strict instructions how to do and what to collect and how to use like your identity in the dark web. And it's a full course of almost a month, which I really like to do, to have with my employees. And yeah, it's another topic, but it's very interesting.
If I can add one thing, it's a really interesting question, but I'd say it's quite theoretical. If you think about, we don't even have the legal or policing capabilities to hunt all the actual criminals down, and you look at the gray area where people do hack back and do probing OSINT. So there was a case recently on Twitter where somebody hacked back a ransomware author, got the decryption keys from their server and released them to the public. And I'm not sure if anybody from like the legal system in their country is following up on that to see if that hackback was legal because it did so much good. I'm not endorsing this, not at all. I'm just thinking it's a really interesting theoretical issue, but in practice, in my experience, it often gets brushed under the table.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not just hypothetical. I'm the guy who discovered the LinkedIn breach in June 2012 and went public with it worldwide. And I downloaded more than 6 million SHA-1 hashes and cracked them, and got assistance from people worldwide to try to figure out where does this leak originate from. Mm-hmm. And in the end, we were able to successfully confirm that the breach is indeed real data from LinkedIn. There was no question about it. Now, I have been asked multiple times over the years, downloading that data dump without knowing the origin, then cracking the passwords and figuring out where it was coming from. Did I do something illegal? And in another scenario, I do recommend business, as an example, to crack the passwords of their own employees, not to punish anyone, but to have a perspective of your current risk in your own organization. But in several countries, in Norway where I live, also in Sweden and Denmark, I have also got into legal discussions on the legality of actually using that. And from a GDPR perspective, government says, no, you can't do that.
I think you're highlighting, sorry for talking so much, guys.
All good.
I think you're highlighting an important point there, which is bigger than the discussion we're having, which is the hostility or the lack of regulation from big companies against security researchers. Right? We often see these knee-jerk reactions where just want to report a big hack and they don't care about it, or they're threatened with legal actions, and that's definitely a big problem where people like you just want to do good, but get threatened by the judicial system or by big companies' lawyers. So I think that's definitely a problem, right, what you're highlighting there.
I can add maybe that in order to share sensitive information with the client, also when it's related to them specifically, we have signed with the customer itself that he wants this information to be discovered, and also the way that we are sharing it is in a protected way, in order that if we are breached and we don't know yet, so it will not be affected. So I guess that if you have the confirmation, like it goes good, and we are not collecting any other information about not of our clients. Yeah, but it's a conflict, it's a dilemma. Yeah.
And that's where a lot of bug bounty programs start, right? The first bug bounty program that you can have is a disclaimer on your website saying if you find any bugs, email it to info@kc.com or something to avoid these challenges, basically.
By the way, so since we just had that magic word pop up in the previous question, do you actually get asked a lot about GDPR compliance from your customers?
About compliance?
Yeah.
Not really. They just want effective intelligence tailored to them. It's very spicy sometimes, so not a lot.
It's a big topic for our clients. They often ask, how can we help them to be GDPR compliant? So not about if we are GDPR compliant, which we are, but how we can help them. So for the customers we talk to, it's a huge topic. They're afraid of the fines, basically.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, but GDPR compliance is not only a threat hunting topic, but it's what you said. Customers come and say, well, help us to be GDPR compliant from our perspective. So, for example, how do we use our user accounts for our environments? I mean, as soon as you have a user account in Azure AD, you need to have kind of a GDPR compliance because it's data which belongs to the user, right?
Okay. So again, so we still have quite a lot of time for questions. So just raise your hand.
Two short questions, maybe. The first, whether you cover IoT and operational system threats also, that usually are not connected to SIEM systems. And the second question is, you addressed threats that are potential or new from the outside, and also threats that may be materialized within the network and produce some noise. What about APTs that might be dormant for a few months in the systems and they didn't do anything yet, the way my wife thinks about me, rightfully?
Well, maybe from the IoT point of view, I mean, going into this IoT space actually means there is no security. I always have a joke, which is the S in IoT is for security. So at the end of the day, an IoT device is an authenticated device. So the device will authenticate against any backend service. So what you need to do at this point is to protect this identity, and with any terms. So whatever it is, you cannot protect the device network from a network point of view, but from the ID point of view.
Your question, if I got it correctly, is almost segueing into a bit of more monitoring than threat hunting, because you said you can't collect logs from an IoT device, as in often cases you can't from an ICS device, industrial control systems, and you cannot install an endpoint agent in most cases. So when I think about monitoring in general, which is a predecessor to threat hunting, you want to collect some data, telemetry, which in most cases you have three ways, right? Sorry for the educational part, but it's a build up to my explanation. First is log collection, SIM. Second could be EDR, so endpoint detection and response, so Carbon Black, CrowdStrike and the likes. Or NTA, network traffic analysis, where again we sit. So we have loads of ICS and IoT customers where you don't need to predefine. The city of Las Vegas is a customer of ours. So we don't predefine what an attack against a smart traffic light looks like. How would you even know, right? We don't define what a threat against a smart carbon dioxide sensor looks like. We see these things being compromised, but you can't collect logs, so you need to find another way, which is often the network. And then clever analytics, like you guys use as well in the cloud, or we use for the network, to detect the anomalies and then dive into it. So that's that part. And the APT is another whole topic, which I cut down my speaking time for now, and maybe my colleagues want to talk about that stuff.
Thank you. I can add about IoT and OT, ICS devices that if we want to look for threat, like many customers that are doing some, maybe they have factories and things like that, and like many companies has these kind of devices, also IoT, and if we like from the external investigation that we are conducting, we are looking for open ports or a known firmware of these devices in Shodan, Sensis, any other tools that takes the banners behind these devices and provide additional information. And we look for, as an outsider of the company, what can I find about my specific client from these tools, okay, from these crawlers, and what should I suggest him in order to block the opportunity to exploit it? Because many times in Shodan you can find default passwords for many IoT that has open ports or open access and can be misused by threat actors. And sometimes it also provide the specific CVE. And then if you look for CVE plus exploit in Google, you can find also exploit. So things are very easy, and also big companies and enterprise fall for these attempts.
Back to your APT question, you said, how can you catch an APT, right? First, I think APTs are probably not most people's issue, actually. Most people should be afraid of the commodity malware, the spear phishing from financially motivated actors. So I think there's a big misconception that many people try to protect themselves against the biggest APTs. Not saying it's wrong to do so, I just think there's a big misalignment in what people try to protect against versus what they should protect against. The second part is, that was a big revelation to me. There is no APT alert. Anybody, any vendor who says, I've got APT alerts, they are just telling you garbage. Because if you want to find an APT, so a human group that's moving slowly over a month, there's no single alert to catch that. What you can and have to do is look across the whole kill chain, so every single step, and look for the trip-ups. Look if the APT, maybe they move laterally once in a month. But if it's anomalous, they never write a file over SMB from that laptop to the domain controller on system 32, because it's just unusual. You have to A, see it, right, alert it, and then quickly investigate and come to a conclusion. So you need to have many, many tripwires, so to speak, be it the lateral movement, be it the command control traffic, because you're never going to catch everything. So you need to make sure you catch something and then can latch onto it and quickly investigate and or threat hunt, if you want to call it that.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, while when thinking about your next question, I have one as well. So when before this session, I thought I had a pretty solid understanding what threat hunting actually is. Now I think that it's almost like everything is threat hunting now. Monitoring and detection and threat intelligence. So is there any limit, is there any wall you would say, this is where we stop and the rest is not threat hunting anymore?
I think it's a real muddy waters here, because people say triaging or monitoring or investigations are threat hunting, right? That's such a fuzzy term. That's why I'm all for saying it's the proactive approach of not starting with an alert. You could start from an IOC, you could start with a hypothesis, and then you go and prove and disprove the data. Everything else is probably just triaging. If somebody says, we have a threat hunting tool, and they present you with 40 alerts every day, that's not threat hunting, that's normal triaging blue team operations, right? So I agree, it's very muddy. There's huge discussions on Twitter about this with a few people. So it's a heat topic for sure.
I have also something to add. Recently, I came into an incident in one of our clients' internal systems, and understood that there is an IP that's starting scanning, trying to do some DDoS attacks against him. And from having this indication, like just doing some deep dive into the IP address and understanding that it was breached recently, and maybe the threat actor is using the breached IP to conduct attacks, I understood that I need to also observe this activity in other clients in a proactive way. And what was amazing to see is that the power behind having an access to multiple clients enables you to have new sensors for threat hunting. It means that this specific observed incident in one client led me to find it in two others, while their security system didn't alert about it. Because there are different security systems that we're integrated with. And we found that one solution alerted, and the other one not. And I felt that this is the power of, for me, for being as an MSSP with, sensors in different countries, not countries, also countries, but in different clients. And this example of threat hunting, we alerted the client, listen, you had these attempts which closely led to a real threat, and you couldn't detect it, and as we tried to hunt it, we found it. So I like it too. And this is a nice example of why, what is the power behind having access to multiple clients.
Coming back to your statement like 10 minutes ago, you said, should we as KC hire threat hunters? I think a good analogy would be if you say, should we as KC build a Ferrari? Right? It would require loads of engineering power, loads of knowledge, loads of training of people. If you start from scratch, engineering from scratch the same stuff, you wouldn't. You buy it, or you consume it if it's a service. So if it makes sense because you want to have the very best Ferrari or racing car, you might start and invest that kind of effort. But for most people, that's A, not feasible, and B, doesn't contribute to their business. So they wouldn't do it. They'd just try to consume it. It's a bit lacking, that analogy, but I think you see where I'm going with it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Tom, any final words for this panel?
Well, yeah, again, I think it's not about the alerts. I mean, yeah, we need the alerts, we need the monitoring, we need all the information to be able to react on it. But the process starting from this point, this is what actually threat hunting means for me. So it's if I have my monitoring, then this is operating. This is what I need to have in every IT environment, in every corporate environment, and reacting on the alerts and knowing what to do with these alerts. This is when threat hunting actually starts. So it was what you said. Of course, we can get 40 alerts from Azure Security Center telling us, well, there's
outbound traffic.
An identity attack to a server, and then you see there's some way around the integrated security stuff you have in there, and these are alerts, but you need to bring them in context, and this is what threat hunters do at the end, I think, and then find out who actually was the attacker and isolate it in your environment.
Okay, awesome. So to summarize what I have learned today, so threat hunting is a policeman, and a detective, and a Ferrari, and a little bit of AI underneath. Well, thanks a lot to all of our panelists. Thanks very much for the audience for sticking up till the break. So we will have about 40 minutes coffee break, and there will be some additional sessions in this room. So see you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.